There is a person in your life right now who is actively working against you. And the terrifying part is that they have no idea they're doing it. They call you first when something goes wrong in their life. They show up when you need them. They say the right things. And every single time you share good news, something shifts. Something invisible. Something that most people dismiss as a feeling. But it isn't just a feeling. It's behavioral data. And once you know how to read it, you will never be manipulated by invisible jealousy again. What I am about to show you are the psychological fingerprints of hidden envy. Patterns so precise, so consistent across human behavior that neuroscientists, behavioral analysts, and intelligence operatives use versions of them every single day. These aren't theories, they're signals. And after you hear this, your brain will automatically start scanning for them in every conversation you have. Let's start with something that will completely reframe how you think about the people closest to you. There is a concept in behavioral neuroscience called mirror neuron suppression. When you watch someone succeed at something, your brain runs a silent simulation. It models what that success would feel like in your own body. For most people, if they genuinely want good things for you, that simulation produces something that looks like joy. They smile, they lean in, their pupils dilate slightly, their voice pitch rises. The response is automatic, biological, and almost impossible to fake consistently. But for someone who secretly wishes you weren't succeeding, someone whose identity is quietly threatened by your growth, that simulation produces something entirely different. Their nervous system doesn't celebrate, it braces. And here's the part most people never see. Their body will try to hide that reaction within a fraction of a second. But that fraction of a second is where all the information lives. The first behavioral pattern, and pay close attention here because this one is disguised so perfectly that most people miss it every single time, is what behavioral scientists call the muted celebration response. Here is exactly what it looks like. You share news, something real, a promotion, a business win, a relationship breakthrough, something you've worked for. And the person in front of you, or on the other side of that phone screen, responds. They say the right words. That's amazing. I'm so happy for you. Wow, good for you. The words check out, but if you slow it down, three things will be off. The delay, the pivot, and the flatline. The delay is the most telling. A genuine celebratory response is fast. When someone hears good news and their mirror neurons are firing with authentic excitement, the response is almost reflexive because the emotion is real. But hidden jealousy produces cognitive interference. The person hears your news, their true emotional reaction fires first, they suppress it, construct an acceptable response, and then deliver it. That whole sequence adds between 1 and 3 full seconds to the response time. In normal conversation, 3 seconds of silence after you share big news is an eternity. Most people blame it on bad phone reception, or assume the person was just distracted. They rationalize it away. Don't. The pivot is what comes next. After the performative celebration, after the "that's amazing," a person experiencing hidden jealousy will pivot. Fast. They will change the subject in a way that returns focus to themselves or to something adjacent to your success that diminishes it. Watch for the pivot. Oh, that's great. Hey, did I tell you what happened with my situation? Or they'll pivot to a risk. Wow, are you sure that's a good idea? I just don't want you to stress yourself out. The pivot is the tell. It's the psyche's way of shortening the amount of time it has to sit in the discomfort of your good news. The flat line is the emotional ceiling. With genuine excitement, people ask follow-up questions. They want details. They want to understand your win because celebrating with someone requires engaging with their world. Hidden jealousy produces the opposite. After the performative response, the questions stop. The engagement drops to 0. The conversation gets quiet. And if you keep talking about your good news, if you keep adding details, you'll notice a subtle but measurable withdrawal of energy from the other person. Their responses get shorter, their enthusiasm fades. They're not being rude, they're running out of the performance capacity to fake something they don't feel. And here's the thing about the muted celebration response that makes it so dangerous. The person doing it is often completely unaware. They believe they're happy for you. Their conscious mind tells them they're a good friend, a good partner, a good family member. But their nervous system is signaling something their ego refuses to examine. And that gap, between what they believe about themselves and what their body is actually doing, is where covert jealousy lives. You cannot argue with it. You cannot confront it, because they will pass any sincerity test you throw at them. They genuinely do not know, which means the only person who can see it clearly is you. Now, I need to tell you something that I want you to sit with for a moment before we go further. Everything I'm describing is not about blame. Hidden jealousy isn't moral failure. It's a survival mechanism baked into the social architecture of the human brain. For hundreds of thousands of years, your neighbor's gain was often your loss. Resources, mates, status, territory. The brain learned to track social comparison the way it tracks physical threat. So when someone close to you succeeds in an area where you feel stagnant, your brain produces a low-grade alarm. Most people never examine it, they just act from it. And that is precisely what makes it dangerous to you. The second pattern is far more sophisticated, and this one, I want you to really lock in here. This one is the one that does the most damage. It's called strategic concern, and it is a masterpiece of unconscious psychological manipulation. Strategic concern sounds like care. It feels like protection, and it arrives at exactly the moment when your confidence is highest, right after you've committed to something, right after you've decided, right after you've announced a direction. The person deploying strategic concern says things like, "I just want to make sure you've really thought this through," or, "I'm not saying don't do it, I just want you to be careful." Or the classic, "I heard about someone who tried something similar and it didn't end well." Every one of those statements sounds like love. Every one of those statements is designed, unconsciously, to introduce doubt into your forward momentum. Here is what is actually happening at the neurological level. When you make a bold decision, when you commit to something that excites you, your brain is flooded with norepinephrine and dopamine. Your confidence is physiologically elevated. Your risk tolerance increases. You are in an optimal state for execution. The person experiencing hidden jealousy, even without realizing it, detects this state. And their nervous system produces a counter-response that looks, from the outside, like wisdom and care, but functions behaviorally like a heat-seeking missile aimed directly at your momentum. The research on this is striking. Studies in social psychology consistently show that individuals who perceive themselves as being in a stagnant position relative to a close peer will unconsciously increase advice-giving behavior in the presence of that peer's success. They don't give this advice to strangers. They don't give it to people they feel superior to. They give it specifically, precisely, in the moments when someone they're quietly envious of is accelerating. And they give it in the language of love. How do you distinguish strategic concern from real concern? There are 3 behavioral indicators that separate them cleanly. The first is timing. Real concern appears during the decision process, before commitment. Strategic concern reliably appears after the decision is made, when the only effect it can have is to reduce your confidence in a path you've already chosen. The second is the presence or absence of problem solving. Real concern says, "I'm worried about X. Here's how I think you could handle it." Strategic concern identifies risk and stops there. It plants the seed of doubt and lets it grow on its own. The third is emotional investment in the outcome. Ask yourself, does this person track what happens? When things go well with the thing they warned you about, do they ask about it? Or do they go quiet and only re-emerge when something goes wrong? That asymmetric attention pattern is diagnostic. It tells you what the person was actually hoping would happen. The third pattern is the one that behavioral scientists find most consistent across cultures, across age groups, and across relationship types. It has nothing to do with what people say. It lives entirely in what they don't say, and it operates through a mechanism called identity comparison deflection. Here is the setup. You have accomplished something. You've built something. You've become something. And there is a person in your life who used to be in a comparable position to you. Same friend group, same school, same starting point, same relationship status, same income bracket. And now there's a gap. You've moved. They haven't. At least not in the same direction. And every time your name comes up in group settings, or every time you naturally dominate a conversation with a relevant story or achievement, you notice that this person does something very specific. They redirect to a third party. What does this look like? You mention a success. Instead of responding to you, they invoke someone else. "Oh yeah, that reminds me of what Marcus did last year." Or, "My cousin actually did something like that." They pull a comparison figure into the room, someone who did what you did but bigger, faster, or under harder circumstances. Or they do the inverse. They mention someone who tried what you're doing and failed. Either way, the function is identical. They are using a third-party reference to recalibrate your status in the room without ever directly challenging you. It is psychologically elegant and almost totally invisible. Here's why it works. Social status in human groups is relative. Your brain doesn't measure your achievements in absolute terms. It measures them against the people around you. And the moment someone introduces a comparison figure, they've reframed your achievement within a new competitive context. You didn't need to be attacked. You didn't need to be criticized. You just needed to be made relative. And suddenly, the room's attention has shifted from your win to a conversation about someone else's win. The people who deploy identity comparison deflection aren't even conscious strategists. They're running a deeply instinctive social move that human beings have been making since the first campfire argument about who caught the bigger animal. But the consistency of it, the way it shows up specifically and only in the context of your success, never in neutral conversation, is the tell. Track it. The person who almost never talks about Marcus suddenly can't stop talking about Marcus the moment you share good news. That's not coincidence. That's the behavioral fingerprint of covert envy. Now, and this is where most content on this topic stops and leaves you, which is exactly where we're going to separate ourselves, I want to give you something you can actually use. Because knowing the signs is only half of the equation. The other half is knowing what to do with the information. And what most people do is wrong. They confront. They withdraw. They start keeping score. They grow resentful. They let the awareness of someone's hidden jealousy become a new form of distraction from their own trajectory. And in doing that, they hand the jealous person an invisible kind of power, the power to occupy space inside their head. Here is the strategic framework I want you to carry out of this video. It operates on 3 levels. The first level is information management. This is the most important and the most immediate. The people who exhibit these 3 patterns, muted celebration response, strategic concern, identity comparison deflection, are not your audience for wins. They are not the people you build with. They are not the people you process vulnerability with. This doesn't mean you cut them off. It means you reclassify them. You stop sharing forward-facing goals with them before you've achieved them. You share accomplishments only in retrospect, when there is no longer any momentum for strategic concern to attack. You stop seeking their celebration, because you know now that it costs them something to give it, and it costs you something to notice they can't. Information management is not isolation, it is precision. You are not closing a door. You are simply choosing which room you walk into. The second level is what behavioral analysts call the neutral redirect. When you detect one of these patterns in real time, when you see the muted response, or you hear the strategic concern launch, or you watch the identity comparison deflection happen, you do not react. You do not correct. You do not call it out. You smile. You acknowledge. And you redirect the conversation to something entirely neutral. You give them nothing to push against. The reason this is powerful is biological. Covert jealousy needs emotional engagement to sustain itself. It feeds on your defensiveness, your over-explanation, your need to justify your success. When you remove that engagement, when you respond with warmth and nothing else, you take away the fuel. The dynamic cannot sustain itself without your participation. The third level is the most powerful, and it's counterintuitive. It's what I call strategic visibility. Instead of shrinking in the presence of people who exhibit these patterns, you expand, strategically, publicly, with precision. Here is why. The psychological discomfort that drives covert jealousy is rooted in proximity, in the fact that your success and their stagnation exist in the same social frame. The instinct is to reduce that discomfort by dimming yourself, to stop sharing, to stop being visible. But that instinct serves their psychology, not yours. Strategic visibility means you continue building, continue sharing where it serves your actual mission, and you let the gap between your trajectory and theirs do the psychological work on its own. You don't celebrate in their face. You don't announce to provoke. You simply refuse to disappear. And that refusal, that quiet, consistent, unapologetic forward motion, is the most destabilizing thing you can do to hidden jealousy. Because it removes the thing hidden jealousy most desperately needs, which is the belief that it is working. There is a broader truth underneath all of this that I want you to hold before we close. The behavioral patterns we've talked about today exist on a spectrum. Every person alive has experienced a version of hidden envy. Every person alive has, at some point, sat in the discomfort of someone else's win and felt the pull to minimize it. The difference is not between good people and bad people. The difference is between people who examine that instinct and people who don't. And the most powerful thing you can do with this knowledge, the thing that actually separates the people who use psychology from the people who merely consume it, is to run these same patterns on yourself. When was the last time someone you care about shared good news and you felt, before you could stop it, a flicker of something that wasn't quite celebration? When did you last give advice that was technically sound, but timed for maximum disruption of someone's momentum? When did you last reach for a comparison figure when the honest response would have been, "I'm proud of you and I wish I had done the same"? These are uncomfortable questions. But the people who ask them, who develop the capacity to detect covert envy inside themselves and interrupt it before it leaks into their behavior, those are the people who build relationships that are actually immune to this dynamic. Because hidden jealousy cannot survive in a person who has learned to face their own shadow honestly. That is the real power move here, not the ability to spot it in others, the ability to dismantle it in yourself. Because once you've felt what it takes to genuinely celebrate someone who is moving faster than you, once you've practiced that response until it becomes automatic, you will understand exactly what it costs the people in your life who cannot do it. And that understanding doesn't produce contempt, it produces clarity. A clarity so precise that you will know in the first 3 seconds of any response to your success exactly what kind of relationship you are standing inside of, and you will know exactly what to do next. There is one final thing, and this is the part most people never hear, because most conversations about jealousy and envy treat them as threats to be neutralized. But there is a version of this story that is entirely different. Some of the most successful people in history have used the awareness of others' covert envy as fuel. Not as resentment, not as scorekeeping, as a signal. Because hidden jealousy at its core is a form of attention. And attention, even unwanted attention, is directional. It points at something that other people's psyches recognize as significant, even when their mouths are saying something different. When multiple people in your life start exhibiting these patterns around a specific thing you're building, when you notice the muted celebrations clustering around one project, the strategic concern aimed at one goal, the identity comparison deflection reserved for one area of your life, that clustering is information. It is the social environment telling you, in its most distorted and uncomfortable language, that what you're doing matters. Use it. The people who train themselves to read behavioral data instead of reacting to performed emotions develop something that no self-help book can give you in a single chapter. They develop what can only be called social sonar. A baseline awareness so calibrated that walking into any room, any conversation, any relationship, they know within minutes where the genuine support is and where the performance of support is. And from that clarity, they make decisions. Who gets access to the real vision? Who gets the surface version? Who gets strategic distance? Not from bitterness, from intelligence. You now have the beginning of that sonar, the muted celebration response, strategic concern, identity comparison deflection. 3 patterns, 3 behavioral signatures, 3 sets of signals that most people spend entire lifetimes confusing for something else entirely. The question is not whether these patterns exist in your life right now. They do. They exist in everyone's life. The question is whether you're going to keep walking past them or whether you're going to start reading them with the precision they deserve. Because the person who smiles at your news and says nothing with meaning, they just told you everything you needed to know. The only question left is whether you were paying attention.